So is chapter 1 your introduction, or you have your introduction, then chapter 1, and chapter 1 is acting as your literature review context?
So chapter 1 is about literature review.
Yes.
Context.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that what how you got it here?
Yeah, because I also discussed this with my friends. She also take this history of art, and they say the first chapter should do the literature review.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I caution you. Everybody's project is different, so it's good to talk about similar trends and stuff like that. But really, you're going to develop this in your own way. But as a literature review, this is far too big. Far too big. You really need, this is your chance to show the literature that you've engaged with to help give your study and analysis a really good foundation. So again, you want to start in your introduction with clearly articulating your research question again. So this study is investigating this. In order to do this, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D. So you've got some sections that are good, but again, they're not really addressing some of the key areas. They're not taking us on that journey, and they're not giving us enough foundational research to build your analysis upon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So again, I think my comments have been pretty clear, I think, right?
Yeah.
So what is the next? Do you have, and was there any particular point of concern here?
Because I feel like I should rewrite this chapter, because it's, I just do a general introduction, but it was not
Yeah, the general introduction and context for your research will go in your introduction, right? Where you introduce this is what I'm studying, this is why it's important and worthy of study, and this is how I'm going to go about doing it. That's your introduction. And then here you're going to engage with wider literature and research to help kind of, again, give that foundation for your analysis and show the reader that you have an understanding of all of the works that surround or will help you better understand your research question, right?
Yeah.
So it does need to be revised quite heavily this chapter to get it to where we want it to be, certainly. So again, anytime that I've said reads too vague, you need specific stats, right? You can't just say that the art market has grown in this is grown. That means nothing.
Yeah.
Grown how?
Yeah.
You want to offer evidence for that.
Yeah. Also, I also check some because maybe I need some data
Absolutely.
to support
this is what all of this is, right?
Yeah.
You need data. You need to engage with wider literature around these particular topics, right? So if you're looking at, for example, the development of post-war art market, you want to engage with the literature of people who have already been talking about that, who can give you insight into what it is that you're exploring and looking at.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And if I want to collect some data, can I search the data through Art News?
All of it, yeah.
Is that
that's anytime you find those stats, you can find stats that way as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you also want to bolster this with academic literature as well, right?
Yeah.
And then give a clear kind of flow of this. And again, I said stuff like says who, right? So you can't make claims and then just some of your claims are very broad. And vague, and then they're also not backed by anything. So that risks having it read editorial or speculative. What I mean by that is just you're commenting on something. That's not what this is about. This is about you critically engaging and digging deep into your area of research by using other resources, by being able to say, because you want to lay the foundation here by saying, look at all the stuff that I know about this particular topic, and I'm going to take you through this. Right? And then, of course, in your analysis, so as a reader, we say, okay, she knows what she's talking about. She's done the work, she does it. So when you go into your analysis, you'll then be able to also draw on this and even more works as well to help say, here's some of the trends and themes that I found in my analysis, and here's how, and I can draw on these other works to help support or bolster my observations and my noting of these trends and themes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go through this. And again, it needs to be more cohesive. You want to, within your literature review, you want to weave in your own research and your research questions. Why are you talking about this particular section? How is this literature and this discussion you're having in each section helping you better understand your research question?
Yeah.
Right? And your framework for analysis.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Because it really needs to be about, okay, so I'm drawing on all of these works, I'm having this discussion. The reason I'm having this discussion, and obviously you're going to write this better, but the reason I've talked about A, B, C, and D in this and taken you on this kind of journey and engaged with this discussion and drawn on all of these particular scholars and stats is because this is going to help me better understand, unpack, explore my research question around this.
Got it.
Does that make sense? So you want to do that for each of the sections, because otherwise it just sounds like you're just talking about stuff and I don't know why you're talking about it.
Yeah. So I maybe like the chapter 1 I was only like I should not like do this like separate parts about like one about auction house, one about
I don't think that that's a bad thing, but you're not doing it robustly enough.
yeah.
And you're not linking it back up to why that matters for your research question enough.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it just is reading, like I'm just, here I'm going to talk a little bit about this, here I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but you want to be like, you want to make it very, very precise and specific about why it is that you're telling me about this stuff. Why it is that you're talking about it, right?
Yeah.
What is so important about this particular subheading and how is it relevant to your research and to your work? You want to make that very clear throughout, right?
Yeah.
So even just a sentence or two at the end that really highlights that. Okay, do me a favor, remind me of re-articulate your research question to me.
Yeah. It's about the evolutionary process of post-war art value.
Mm-hmm. The evolution of post-war art value.
Yeah.
But that's not a question. What's the question?
Like last semester we talked about like we want to find out like how could this happen about the post-war arts was like boom so fast. Like we are going to talk about like 2 case studies.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out
absolutely.
what if.
But what's the question?
The factors behind the increasing post-war art.
Absolutely. So it's maybe about better understanding or exploring or questioning the socioeconomic factors that have impacted the rapid rise of post-war art. That's the question. That's what you're asking. You're asking how has this happened? What are the social factors, social and economic factors that might have led to the rapid increase in post-war art?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you want to focus on. And I want you to put that on a piece of paper. But no, honestly, this is what I do and I find it quite helpful. Write that question down, put it next to you, and make sure that everything that you're talking about makes sense and speaks to that question. How is this helping you understand this? How is this literature and the stats going to help give context for this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So value trends post-war art. So yeah, this is a good example of a really kind of vague and far too speculative statement, right?
Yeah.
The post-war European market has always maintained a certain advantage with its profound artistic tradition and rich artist resources. What does that mean?
I mean, it was like.
Like I know what it means, but you want to like really you want to unpack it and be clear because that's very vague, right?
Yeah.
Like what do you mean by you know, what advantage are you, what certain advantage? That could be anything, right? And, you know, profound artistic tradition. What is this profound artistic? You want to get specific, right? You want to avoid kind of broad sweeping statements.
Yeah.
You could have a statement like this and then go and add 3 or sentences afterwards that unpack it by saying this statement and saying specifically it does A, B, C, and D, and this and this and this. Like, so you can then expand on that and then give evidence and offer citations to how you've come to make this claim and what you mean by that claim. That's fine.
Yeah.
But just leaving it as it is not going to work.
Okay, so I definitely need some like statement to support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is far too vague, far too sweeping,
Yeah,
far
yeah.
too general. You want to get more specific. Specifically, this is how it's done this.
Yeah,
Specifically, it's
advantage.
had this advantage in, for example, its artistic tradition, which included A, B, C, and D, which saw, you know, marked, you know, attention from various, you know, art market people such as blah, 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 blah. And then it's also had rich resources in terms of A, B, C, and D, which has meant, like, so you want to back that claim up with statistics and evidence and examples and research,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'm going to sit there and go, A, I don't know what you mean by this, like that could be anything, and B, says who, and how are you backing this claim, right?
Yeah.
So and don't forget, it's not just going to be me, it's going to be another secondary marker, right? So
Yeah.
you want to make a really strong case and develop a really, really strong argument for all of this, right?
Yeah.
So again, you have your research question, make sure you're talking about that I want each and every one of these, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to rework this
Yeah.
and resubmit it to me,
Yeah.
and we can just to see if we can make this stronger, and then you can use that as a template for your other chapters of what is going to be expected of you in order to get a good mark,
Yeah.
a strong mark,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
make a strong piece of work and research. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So I want it to be very clear up here. Art market is under change and development. Sure. And then you want to say. I want your question to be someplace in this, you know.
Yeah. In the introduction.
You know, as previously, and you can signpost it and say stuff like as previously noted. This study is intent on investigating this. It will suggest, you know, in order to unpack this more, this chapter is going to begin to map the evolution and the roles that these particular things have played in promoting this rapid rise. It will do so by drawing on various stats and various literature around these particular topics.
Yeah.
Starting with this, then going on to this, then going on to this. Each of which will add further insight to my study. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
And then I want all of this to take all of this. Each of these sections need to be really concise. I want you, they call it like the red thread, right? So I want everything in this chapter to connect to each of its points, and each of these points are your research questions. So really clearly, I want to show why you're talking about all of them and how they connect.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
The end of each, I want you to justify why this was important, what was key aspects of the stuff that you're looking at, what are some gaps in the research that's out there on this, if any, and how your work is going to further look at it and or contribute to those discussions. That's what your literature review and your context this chapter should be about. Showing that you've engaged with the literature, giving the foundation, setting the stage, but also critically engaging with it in ways that you can say, you know what, this is what all the stats have said. Here's some questions that might come out of these stats that as part of my investigation. Here's what maybe some of the literature hasn't really explored that I'm going to try doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I want that to be within each of the sections.
Yeah, so like the literature review, do I need like raise my own opinion in this?
Absolutely. This is you critically engaged. This is not you just describing something. This is you saying, here's information This is why this information is important. This is why it's particularly useful for my study. Here's where some gaps are in the literature. It's not really being in all of the massive amount of literature that I've looked at. They haven't really noted this or this or this, or they've noted this, but they haven't really explored it. And that's where my study is going to really kind of particularly focus on expanding on.
Yeah.
Or this person's wrote a lot about this, and that's of particular interest in this, and I will be building on this person's work and this person's work to further understand this progression and the wider socioeconomic impacts that might have had. You also don't have any wider socioeconomic impacts here, right? You need a section that actually goes into the social change. That's what we were talking about. You want to talk about that kind of what was happening during this particular time that might have impacted that. That needs to be in here. And make sure, again, none of your sections really do what it claims to do, right? Like at the beginning, you're saying, I'm going to do all this kind of stuff, but none of those do it. So make sure that you write at the top of your introduction, you have your research question, and you have the aims for this chapter and the aims for each section. I'm going to do this in this section. I'm going to explore the socioeconomic context of the time. Then I'm going to understand the auction houses evolution from this period to this period. I'm going to map that out. Then I'm going to map the rise of particular. You want to make sure that you're actually doing it, offering evidence, unpacking it, and critically engaging with it.
Yeah.
And then again, looping that back into, so what? Why are you telling us? Why is that important for your research? What is that helping you do? Are you building on this information, and in what ways?
Okay, so I get it, because I'm just gonna raise the main question, and each section will answer another sorry, it was the questions related to the main question.
You're not asking more questions. You have one question, right?
Yeah.
And all of this has to relate to that one question. So
because each sections was to telling why this was important to this.
To your research question. Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, you've got it 100%, right? So why are we talking about that? Weave it back in there as much as possible, right?
Yeah.
So I think that would be good. So try doing that. Get that revised and redone. I want to see a lot more robust engagement with wider literature, stats, address all of the vague statements that you've had, and try to, again, remember that you're taking us on a journey. So make sure that each section flows really nicely. If you're talking about the evolution, talk about each of the stages in turn, right?
Yeah.
So don't bounce around. Say, in this decade it looked like this, just to be easy at the first part. This decade looked like this decade looked like this decade looked like this. This is what the research has said, about all of these. This is what insights we can draw from this evolution and why that's important to me. Here's what the studies that I've just talked about have really, exemplified, and here's how I'm going to build on them and how they're going to help with my research question.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's just nice, clear, concise, and you're adding in all your evidence in terms of, what scholars you're drawing on, and then you can feel free to make those more sweeping comments like, listen, it has had a massive impact in these particular ways, as I've demonstrated in this section, right?
Yeah.
Then that makes more sense. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I'm not really supposed to, but I will look over the revised chapter again, just so that we have a really good foundation for what the rest of the work should look like. Because you've got some information there that can be used. It just needs to be far more academically robust, right?
Yeah.
So really draw on lots and lots of readings and literature. Have you been working with a lot of literature?
Yes.
Okay.
Because in the first year we do literature review, but we do the first year literature review just only about what the academic readings talk about, but we will not raise our own opinions.
Sure. Yeah. So for this, but I mean, in terms of your own this project and this dissertation, have you been already doing a lot of readings around this time?
I do like, because like when I was like think like one question possibly was like about like what's the like market value behind like Mark Rothko, and I was just do some research about that, but like when you read one, then got like some new questions was like appear, then you have to read another one, so like
well, you should be reading for your dissertation. It should be well over 40 pieces of writing at least for a robust piece of work, right? So it just is not just going to be about specific. They might be talking about specific pieces of art, but you want to think about it in its broader sense. So they're talking about this, but how can I think about the way that things that they're describing or reasons that they're describing of the upswing, how can I also apply that to wider thinking about the general art market in general? How can it use to help evidence that this trend is happening and support support that and my mapping of the evolution of that? So you want to, and so you just want to make sure you've got a really good set of resources. Does that make sense? And again, you'll want some good resources around just I'm sure there's lots of literature around the social and economic reasons for some of the upswings that we're seeing. So you want to engage with those. And if you like a piece of reading, it's always good just to go to the bibliography on that and see who they've been citing, because they're building their argument based on other people's research as well. That's part of academia, right? We're all saying, okay, so I like this way of thinking, or I like this, or this research is interesting, I'm going to build upon that, or I'm going to take it a little bit farther, however minutely, right? So you want to go back and see who they built their arguments on. That might be a useful place to find more literature to help bolster this. Does that make sense? Awesome. Good. Okay, so let's get this revised. When's a good timeline for you to get this chapter revised? We want to have it as a fairly quick turnaround because you're going to have to do the rest of the work.